Hey, welcome back everyone to the Progressive Brothers Podcast. This is episode 64. I'm here with my co-host, Renaissance Man.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like the video, and peace to everyone in the chat.
Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast. Today's topic is Lieutenant Michael Byrd of the Capitol Police, who was involved in the shooting of Ashley Babbitt, insurrectionists who tried to breach the Capitol doorway. Now, he was found lawful in his actions, and there's been a lot of brouhaha about whether or not he murdered her, according to Trump. What's your thoughts on this, Renaissance Man?
To me, it's kind of what I assumed. Obviously, everyone I think knew ahead of time. You know, this is a black guy who pulled the trigger. Obviously, this was a white female. Trump came out and said that he murdered her. Just judging on Trump's past of black men and situations like this, I think back to the Central Park case. Trump never apologized then, and I don't see him apologizing now. For me, though, it was, like I said, it was confirmation. It's an official record. And to me, it at least you have the official record there. I think the far right's still going to try to make her a martyr just because, facts don't seem to matter much. But at the end of the day, I think he made a decision that saved lives.
Yeah, definitely. I think the shot actually prevented others from thinking about jumping through that window too. If you notice as you look at the video replay, there's a lot of other people who were thinking about going through that window, and then they saw what happened to her, and they were like, "Yeah, I think I'll take a rain check on that." But to Ashley Babbitt's lawyer basically says, she didn't possess a firearm. She was so far away from the other elected officials, and she posed no threat from the position that she was in. But I would argue different. If you look at the way the door was barricaded, there's a lot of stationary furniture that was used to actually prevent them from rocking their way in, which I find to be remarkable because the weight of that furniture was just enough to keep them from barging in. Pretty interesting. But the idea that she wasn't a threat, according to her lawyer, or the family's lawyer that they appointed for her, the idea that she didn't have a weapon doesn't mean anything to the officer, right? The officer, Lieutenant Michael Byrd, gave the command to stop and do not enter. And she decided she was going to do it anyways, and she got shot. So whether or not she had a weapon is immaterial to what actually happened. Because when we think about black men, or even black women, you can throw black women in this as well. Several people in the last year or so, prior to the insurrection, were shot just off of happenstance that they were there, right? We've seen several black men who have been shot and killed, if not killed, injured profusely in apprehension. But we don't see that really happening with white people to that extent. Now, this woman who defied all the rules decided that the rules didn't matter to her, and that she had a lawful right to be inside that Capitol for whatever reason, and the lawyer doesn't seem to identify that. Do you know if charges were dropped against her? I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not sure. I think my understanding for the lawyer is I believe they are trying to sue maybe the Capitol Police. I don't believe they have charges against Michael Byrd, because to me the whole thing doesn't make sense in the first place, because I always go back to, and I had some discussions with people on various message boards who were trying to argue in favor of this. I'm like, you got to put yourself in his shoes of, hey, you all have already entered the Capitol. You breached police barricades. You haven't gone through security. You're storming the Capitol. He even said in the interview of Lester Holt that he got a call over his radio saying there have been shots fired in the Capitol. That later turned out to be false, but still, he got the report. That plays into his mindset then. You've barricaded the door. You have people on video literally trying to break the glass, tear the doors off the frame, basically trying to come in. He literally pulls out a gun, and you hear the guy standing next to her say he's got a gun. He steps back. You know, at that point, I guess the glass is broken, and she jumps through the window, or is climbing through the window, and he fires once, and you see obviously she gets hit and falls back through the window, and everyone starts scattering. But to me, that's the last line of defense, because you've seen people overpower officers. You're in there in the speaker's chamber trying to protect them. You know, when you have people literally destroying property, chance of, hang Mike Pence, you have to make a discretionary call there. And that's what he did. And I think also we don't know what these people's objectives were, and we don't know who was armed. She may have not been armed, but someone in that crowd could have been armed. So to me, it's you have to look at, I don't see how there's any viable lawsuit just because they were already breaking and entering federal property. You had death threats, they were not listening to police, and then on top of that, you have to think of, okay, if they got to Congress, who knows what these people would have done. And then it would have been like, well, why didn't people act more aggressively, if someone would have got killed?
Yeah. I mean, if we can go back a few years ago, Marion Carey was the woman who was in D.C. that drove around in circles during the Obama administration. And they opened fire on her. Not just one officer, multiple officers in her car with a toddler in the back seat. Miraculously, they never, the toddler was not hit, but they shot her so many times with so many different officers. I don't know how many different agencies may have been involved in that, but they shot her. She was in her car. She was outside of the institutions itself. And so I find this to be really, really interesting that they consider, and this woman wasn't even armed, they consider her shooting to be justified, and a lot of people laughed at it. But when it comes to Ashley Babbitt, there's this idea that, you didn't have to shoot her. And I'm saying, well, what else? What was the alternative to not shooting her?
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, I don't think in that situation, it's a judgment call. I think someone asked, why was she shot in the neck? And he was like, well, we're taught to aim for center of mass. She was obviously coming through the window sideways, so it hit her in the neck. I heard people who were conservatives trying to make the argument, well, they should have fired a warning shot. And I'm like, no, please don't fire warning shots. Like, that's not what they're trained to do. And in some states, I believe, maybe the majority of states, you as a civilian, if you fire a warning shot, you can go to jail because, bullets got to land somewhere. So to me, it was just, like I said, it was a judgment call. If she did not want to put herself in that situation, don't storm the Capitol, or if you're even if you're inside the Capitol, don't try to break down the door to the speaker's chamber where Congress is. Like, there aren't going to be Secret Service and people waiting to deal with you. I mean, to me, I just don't know what these people were thinking or expecting when you go after elected officials. I mean, like I said, there's Secret Service there for a reason. The other thing I think that is that's really unique is, or not unique, but surprising, is I heard that the police officers, I don't know if they're suing Trump or if they're suing, or who, I think it may be the Trump organization. But basically the Fraternal Order of Police is not basically suing on their behalf for this whole issue for, damages and violence and things that happened to the officers. So there's actually a suit out there with the officers having to sue on their own money, because their own union is not backing them, because the Fraternal Order of Police backed Trump unanimously in the 2020 election. So they're even having to, deal with that on top of, what you had to deal with on January 6th.
Yeah, this can be this. You could see the fracturing of law enforcement over this whole entire incident, especially if it drags out over time with this Senate investigation and everything else. So the way how I'm looking at this is like conservatives are rationalizing the idea that they have a right to be inside the Capitol, despite the fact that there were barricades everywhere keep preventing them from even being in there. In fact, the charges that they brought against some of the other insurrectionists was the fact that they were trespassing and unlawful damaging of property by trying to breach the window, right? So if Ashley Babbitt was, if it was an unjustifiable shooting, you have to explain what was her goal. What was her goal to get past the window in that hallway? What was the motive?
What I wouldn't think, like I said, judging on what they've done, I wouldn't think it was the best of intentions. And like you said, even if you made the argument that, hey, okay, they went in the Capitol, you didn't go in an orderly or you had permission to. You didn't go in an orderly manner. Anybody knows if you're going to go into somewhere like that, you're going to have to go through security. And then on top of that, you're destroying property. Breaking down doors, doing. So, I mean, even if you made the argument, hey, the police let us in and stood down. Okay, does that give you the right to go and try to break down the doors to the speaker's chamber, which they're clearly trying to keep you out of a restricted area? It's just a crazy argument to me, and I'm not surprised, but it's just crazy that people are trying to find a way to justify any of this. And the other thing I think is interesting too is, I was surprised the brother actually revealed his identity, because I'm sure, when I saw it was going to be revealed, I'm like, I'm sure this is going to give him all sorts of death threats. People are going to go dig up his past, which, they already did, saying that he left a service weapon in a hallway, in a bathroom at one point. That's the type of things I think I could see people doing just because people just don't know when to let it go. And on top of that, for whatever reason, they don't want to accept that this woman was in the wrong. Trump has said that he murdered this woman, and Trump told people not to wear a mask, and look at where you have people refusing to wear a mask and kids getting sick. It's just people you can't talk reason to people like that, and that's why I was kind of surprised that he revealed his identity, because I definitely think he's going to be a target.
Well, I think it puts the center of focus on him and not so much on the Capitol Police, right? Because they're really looking for him, and it's like, well, he's like, well, you don't have to, wonder who I am. I'm right here. Come get me, right? That sort of perspective. I think that's a really interesting move to take, especially at this point. I probably would have waited maybe 90 days or so, but that's his choice. But they're trying to your point, that they were trying to find incompetence on his behalf. If him shooting Ashley Babbitt was considered to be negligent and incompetent, how do you explain like George Floyd, right? The same people who are saying that George Floyd deserved to die, or Ahmaud Arbery deserved to die, or Alton Sterling or Philando Castile, because he smoked weed, he deserved to be shot. How do you rationalize that and then not justify Ashley Babbitt's shooting? Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The position that conservatives seem to take is always the perspective of they're right because they're conservative and that's all that matters. But Ashley Babbitt was not a conservative, at least not according to her Twitter post.
Yeah, she voted for, I believe she voted for Trump recently, but she was an Obama supporter prior, I believe.
Yeah, but none of her ideals are conservative at all. They're mostly just radical, if that makes any sense. They don't really make a whole lot of sense. They're kind of all over the place according to her Twitter posts. she's gonna, you can meet me outside, you can catch a flight, and all this other stuff that she was posting on her Twitter post. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't know how she can be identified as a conservative when she's not barefoot in the kitchen like conservatives want. And so I don't get it. I guess you can attribute her military service as being conservative, but that would be the extent of it. But even then, she's not in the military. So what? Well, they shot
and
her
I've even right. Well, that's the other angle I've heard conservatives try to take is, oh, she's a veteran, which I'm like, I get it. Yeah, you don't want to see someone who served, come and get killed in their own country. But once again, as a veteran, you should know, hey, you should specifically know, hey, if I go storm a federal building, I know that, hey, like I said, there's going to be Secret Service there. There's going to be some sort of security detail that's going to deal with me before I go and get close to an elected member of Congress. I mean, you just know that because you're in the military. I mean, that's the other thing I didn't get when people were trying to, invoke her status as a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
It made no sense to me.
Yeah, like she has some kind of special privileges. Well, if that was the case, I don't see them doing anything for veterans any other time, right? I mean, there's plenty of black men that were veterans and kind of left to their own demise. I don't really see them speaking so highly about black veterans. It only seems to be white veterans that they're concerned about.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I found it interesting. I can't remember. I think maybe Lester Holt asked this question of, why did he use deadly force but none of his colleagues didn't? And to me, again, I go back to, he's the last line of defense. It doesn't look good to stand down, but at the end of the day, if you're in that situation, you're under pressure, you're a police chief, you may think, okay, I can lose the Capitol building temporarily as long as I have the members of Congress secured. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure they're thinking, hey, they don't know their way around. Once I get reinforcements, I can take back control of the building. My main thing is just getting the members of Congress and elected officials secure. So to me, it makes sense where, hey, if they're not close by, I don't have to really, I can try to keep them out, but I don't have to use any sort of deadly force unless I'm met with it. He's at the point where, hey, this barricade gives way and, these people get through, I'm going to be overwhelmed and, basically I can't do my duties. So I think like I said, once again, I think he was justified, and the fact that he was the only one who used lethal force that day, I think really speaks to just the position he was in versus the position his colleagues were in.
Well, remember the testimony from other colleagues that were on the four members who testified at the hearing. Basically, they said, the insurrectionists said that we should kill them with their own gun. So maybe lethal force was justified in this. Just maybe, based on the testimony from the four members and why does his name slip my mind right now? Who was going up the Capitol steps and leading the two brothers?
Eugene, the sergeant at arms.
Yeah, Eugene.
I can't remember his last name.
They had buck knives on him. So yeah, he couldn't use his firearm in that situation because he was outnumbered and he had a strategy to lead them to a different location. In the case of Michael Byrd, I would say complete agreement with you and Byrd himself that he did his job, he did what he was told, and the shooting was justified because the defense of the Capitol personnel was way more important of a priority than a radical veteran who followed QAnon and claimed to be was a MAGA supporter. She had a backpack. I mean, what was inside the backpack? I really would like to know that. She may have not been carrying a weapon, but she may have been carrying some hog ties or some zip ties. So
yeah. The last thing I'll say too is, I think you also look at it, there's an element of bravery too. Because one of the things, that was mentioned is, earlier on is, why didn't officers, use their gun or something like that? And it was like, hey, you have 12 shots in your pistol and
15.
Yeah. And then what? You're going to get overwhelmed by this crowd who, is going to be pissed that you tried to use deadly force. So for him, I think it was actually an element of bravery too, in the sense of, he could have fired this shot and, someone could have returned fire, or, it could have emboldened the crowd more. It was just lucky that, hey, people were like, oh, he's got a gun, and that sort of stunned them, and they freaked out and kind of backed up, versus, it could have gone the other way where, they could have kept coming and even come even stronger. So, I think the level of bravery should not be overlooked in this situation, because, like I said, it's a judgment call, and it could have very well gone the other way.
Absolutely. Like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at brothers_podcast.